Hello again, and welcome to another edition of Nitrate Freak's Silent Film Reviews. Today we're going to be talking about F.W. Murnau's film City Girl from 1930, his last film for Fox, and ultimately his second to last film overall. Now, F.W. Murnau has to be one of the most famous and most recognized names of the silent era. During his years in Germany, he would make at least 3 of the most popular and long-lasting silent films of all time: Faust, The Last Laugh, and of course the immortal Nosferatu. He would be poached in 1926 by Fox and came to America to make 3 films before he would ultimately die in a car accident in 1931. Now, City Girl is perhaps his most simple and elegant film. It resembles Sunrise only in the fact that it's a yin to its yang. They're kind of bookends, if you can think of it this way, and that they both sort of deal with the dangers of the city. The plot of City Girl is essentially a young man goes to the city to sell his family's wheat crop. Once he makes it to the city, he meets a girl who is working at a local restaurant. They fall in love. He brings her back to the farm. His puritanical and traditionalist father thinks that she's a typical city girl, taking advantage of his naive son. She begins to prove her worth on the farm, has to fight off the advances of unwanted farm workers, and eventually wins back the love of both the son and the father. And they ride off into the sunset with a happy ending. Based on that simple synopsis, it's hard to believe that this film would be anything other than boring. Well, it is not. So, City Girl deals with the dangers of the city and the homicidal small-mindedness of the country, as Scott Eyman said in his fascinating book, The Speed of Sound, about the coming of the talkies. And Murnau's mise-en-scene in this film really does capture this duality. The sequences within the city are fast-paced, bustling. The camera is moving. They're even chaotic at times, but inside the restaurant even. Once the film shifts and moves to the countryside, you get a languid pace. The camera still moves, but the mise-en-scene is open and vast. Check out this sequence here, where the father back on the farm is saying his blessings before cutting into his daily bread, and then the film cuts to a machine inside the restaurant mechanically slicing that bread. This is the duality of the film in one scene. And this is when the movie truly, opens up and becomes a masterpiece. So, City Girl relies on extraordinary framing and masterful manipulation of off-screen space that suggests a complex world just outside the limits of the frame, characteristic of Murnau's cinema, but shifts toward a more American tone, sensibility, and a pared-back, starkly realized mise-en-scene. This is what Adrian Danks says about the film in his 2003 essay, which was included in Eureka's Blu-ray edition of this movie. Now, I think that that's probably the best way to sum up what we have here. Is, it's a simple movie done with an extraordinarily precise detail. Now, F.W. Murnau was probably one of the hottest commodities in 1926. Everybody knows about Nosferatu. Even people who've never seen a silent film before know about Nosferatu. Murnau's 1924 film, The Last Laugh, would be even more well-respected in its time, and is probably the single greatest of the German Expressionist films. One of the many innovative features of that movie was its sparse use of title cards. There's one title card at the end. And this is something that Murnau would continue to do, really attempting to tell the story completely visually. After his 1926 film, Faust, he would come to America and make Sunrise, the story of two humans. Sunrise would earn the Oscar for Outstanding Achievement in Film. The only year that the Oscars ever gave out 2 Best Picture Oscars. The other one went to Wings, traditionally considered the first Best Picture winner, but I think Sunrise was actually the artistic achievement of the year. Murnau would make a second film for Fox, Four Devils, which is unfortunately lost, one of Murnau's few lost films. Most of his filmography is actually extant and been restored, which is something that we're very lucky about. After the release of Four Devils, Murnau went to Oregon to film his next movie on location. Originally titled Our Daily Bread, City Girl was filmed over a couple of months in 1928 as a silent film. Now, between August and October of 1928, Hollywood was becoming overrun with the advancement of sound. Silent pictures were on the way out, and Murnau was making a silent epic about wheat. The on-location photography took place basically in the middle of nowhere, almost an hour away from where the cast and crew were staying in Pendleton, Oregon. So they had to get up, travel an hour out into the middle of nowhere where they built this farm and filmed all these beautiful sequences. Sometime near the end of filming, there was a takeover of the Fox Corporation, and the new ownership forced major changes upon Murnau and City Girl. They insisted on the insertion of sound sequences and insisted on a heavy edit. Murnau's first cut of the film was something along the lines of 90 minutes as a silent feature. What Fox ended up releasing in 1930 was a little over an hour, half of which was newly filmed sound sequences that were not filmed by Murnau. Murnau was in Tahiti filming Taboo, his final film. Now, what is very interesting about City Girl, it's one of the only examples I know of in which the bastardized sound version is the version that is lost to history, and the original silent version is what we still have, as close to Murnau's original vision as possible. According to Scott Iman from his book The Speed of Sound, Murnau was perched on the edge of a volcano, for Our Daily Bread was a silent picture just entering production at a time when the grosses of silent pictures were plummeting, a time when all anybody wanted to talk about was sound. He also says, it's not a definitive Murnau film. It lacks the textural density and the precise rhythm of his other work. But as historian David Shepard says, it represents a compromised version of the original silent before everyone threw up their hands and walked away. If Sunrise is a symphony, City Girl is a chamber piece. I think that says it best. The insertion of the talkie scenes and the major editing of the film did nothing for its grosses. City Girl was a massive failure, and Murnau would not live long enough to see his original vision come through. I think when he died, he probably looked at City Girl as a complete and utter failure. But again, that's just what I think. Now, a little bit about the lasting impact of the film City Girl. When the silent print was discovered in 1970 and shown, it was a huge success and would become a massive influence on other filmmakers. Nestor Almendros, the cinematographer of Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven, professed on that film's Criterion commentary track that Murnau's City Girl was a huge influence on the film Days of Heaven. And to be honest, they're almost as like they're the same movie, just done 50 years, 60 years apart. It's truly astonishing, the connections between the two. You can see the influence all over Days of Heaven. But Terrence Mallick does have that languid visual style that one can associate with Murnau. I remember when I saw City Girl the first time, I was like, this is Days of Heaven. And then I watched Days of Heaven with the commentary track and learned that, yeah, this is Days of Heaven. City Girl has been restored. It was restored back in 2011 by Eureka for their Masters of Cinema series. Unfortunately for American audiences, this is a Region 2 Blu-ray, though mine still plays in my non-Region 2 Blu-ray player, so you probably can't get your hands on this one for less than a couple of $100 because it is out of print. That being said, if you do have the money, I absolutely think you should get this Blu-ray. It has been released on DVD by Universal's Archive, but it is not this wonderful restoration by Eureka. Now, personally, I think City Girl is as good and as interesting as Sunrise. Sunrise gets most of the attention because of its insanely innovative camera work. It's just beautiful images, and for good reason. I saw Sunrise in the theater with live musical accompaniment, and it was one of the greatest film-going experiences of my life. City Girl is a quieter piece. As Scott Iman says, it is the chamber piece next to Sunrise's symphony. But I like chamber pieces, and this one is so well done and so precise. The visual beauty is there for you to see. It's hard to miss. Adrian Danks, from his essay, which was included in the Masters of Cinema Blu-ray booklet, says, in essence, Murnau cinema is a quixotic entity possessing an elusive, shifting, and experimental style, varying, departing, and returning with each film. I think that's a good summation of Murnau in total. Never one to stick in one genre. Never one to do the same film twice. There are so many surprises in his oeuvre that once one dives in, it's hard not to come back out an eternal Murnau fan. So, anyway, City Girl, Murnau's second to last film from 1930. Until next time, thank you for tuning in.